Well, let's get going. And as always, this will be available later on for you to view. So share this with your friends. My name is Michael Silhavy. I'm the Senior Project Editor at GIA. And I hope by now you know that over the past 18 months, we have entered the webinar world. And today is one of those topics that whether or not you think this is going to happen to you, it is going to happen to you. I remember 20, 30 years ago, we thought that the issue of parishes combining and sharing worship spaces and clergy and ministers, oh, that was just something that happened out in the West or something. But it's here in all parts of the country. Maybe not so much the Southwest, where I understand the biggest problem there is making sure there's enough parking spots for Mass on weekends. But so I'm Michael Silhavy, and let's go geographically from west to east. And if the panelists would introduce themselves. Mary Jo.
I'm Mary Jo Quinn. I'm a pastoral assistant with responsibilities for liturgy, music, and outreach at Blessed Trinity Parish here in Missoula, Montana. Hello, everybody.
Kim.
Hi, everyone. I am Kim Mandico. I am the Director of the Office for Worship in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. So we are just north of Chicago.
And Father Jim.
Hey, I'm Jim Chaponis. I'm Director of Music at the Diocese of Pittsburgh part-time, beginning my 25th year in that ministry. And then I'm also a parish priest here at a merged combined parish.
Yeah, and I think maybe all of us were a little modest in our introductions in that, Kim, you were in another diocese. I've been in a worship office. Early on, or earlier today, I was reminded that Mary Jo succeeded my wife at a parish. Sometimes I think there's about 9 of us and we just all keep changing positions or something. So yeah, a lot of us here have different experiences. And we are here to talk about whatever you want to call it, clustered, merged, yoked, connected, partnered, and that'll also be part of the discussion today, just giving folks an idea of how this is done throughout the country. Kim, can we start with you? And can you just tell us some of the positions you have found yourself in, either as a parishioner or a minister or in a diocesan office? What are some of the ways you have experienced this idea of parishes coming together?
Sure. So my first experience of a multi-parish community was actually my home parish, just outside of Red Wing, Minnesota. Country parishes, we had 3 parishes that shared 1 priest. And this would have been back in the early 80s when the parishes came together under 1 priest. The interesting thing was, this is rural Minnesota and our parishes were about 30 miles apart. So Mass schedules had to be adjusted so the priest could get to each one of the locations. And then years later, I found myself as a music director and director of liturgy in a merged parish in southern Indiana. And then in my experience here in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, I would say the majority of our parishes are either multi-site parishes, multi-parish communities, or parishes that collaborate with one another, neighboring parishes that either share staff or share priests or have some sort of financial resource shared relationship.
Kim, can you remind us what's some of the language that Milwaukee uses to identify these parishes? They're identified as what type of parishes?
Absolutely. So we have what we call multi-parish communities, because often the 1 or 2 parishes are coming together to form a single community now. And we try to avoid the use of clustered parishes because there's some negative connotations that comes with that word. And we also we sometimes call the parish communities collaborating parishes. And these are situations where the parishes haven't quite merged yet under leadership or finances, but they're collaborating with one another to share resources. Sometimes that starts with DREs, religious education, or even music resources.
Mary Jo, what are some scenarios you found yourself in?
Well, I am right now in a parish that merged about 15 years ago. And when I arrived on the scene, it had just been together for 2 years, but it created a whole new parish identity out of two parishes. We also, in our diocese, we don't talk about merged or clustered or any of that. We just move the priest around on a Sunday from parish to parish. And sometimes the smaller ones become a mission. So we also are serving a mission parish, although it was always a mission, even though at a certain time it thought it wasn't just a mission. So it understands itself as a mission. So every Sunday morning, Ed and I go to Lola, which is really only 8 miles away. So our distances are totally different and our terminology is different, but our populations are also smaller.
Jim, your scenarios?
Well, we've been having some kind of reorganization of parishes, geez, for about 25 years or so. The previous bishop, Bishop Worrell, had some phases, but in recent years, the most aggressive redistricting has happened within the past 5 years, and we're kind of at the last stage of that. And so there are many meetings held in parishes by diocesan staff giving input. And parishes in the diocese, there are over 200, were put into parish groupings. And those groupings were adjusted from anywhere from 2 to 7 parishes. Then parish priests were named as administrators of these groupings. And then after a certain amount of time, the groupings were to become a new parish. So there was a new name given to the parish, and then the other previous parishes would retain their name, but as a church, So for example, the parish that I serve is Resurrection Parish. Love that name. Glad that we got that name because we have, not just because of the resurrection, but we have at both churches, we have a beautiful, beautiful picture of not an actual picture, of course, but an artist rendering of the resurrection. My parish here originally was St. John Capistrán. The other one was St. Thomas More. So we're no longer St. John Capistrán Parish or St. Thomas More Parish, we're Resurrection Parish. But masses are held at St. John Capistrán Church and at St. Thomas More Church. And there's one pastor, I'm no longer a pastor because of my choice, senior parochial vicar, okay, which is a fancy title for someone who was a pastor, but is no longer a pastor currently, since I'm also director of music for the diocese on a part-time basis. So that's kind of where we are right now. And we've had a lot of challenges, but it's basically gone rather smoothly, all things considered, although there have been some bumps in the road, because as all of us know, it's never easy to combine parishes into one, or to close buildings, or to look at staff and make some kind of reductions.
And later on, we'll be sharing with the folks a wonderful 2-page document that you offer to the diocese there, which kind of is, I think you say it's not a blueprint, but it's just suggestions of things to attend to. And you can help us go through that near the end. You know, and I myself, ironically, this very week, I find myself at the newly constituted St. Paul VI Parish outside of Chicago. We think we're the first parish under Paul VI patronage in the U.S. 3 congregations came together. A new name was given to us, and 2 of the sites are remaining open, and 1 of the sites is being suspended. So I'm living through this also. In the course of our webinar, we want to talk about strategies, scheduling, resources, leadership, playing nice together, and all of those aspects that we need to think about as we bring these parishes and music ministries together. Mary Jo, could you maybe just tell how you did it in your place? You said that this happened 11 years ago, I think you said. I'm sorry if I was. And so what did it look like in your particular circumstance? How did these communities come together?
Well, it was kind of an interesting process. The two parishes were formed in the late 70s at the same time as satellites of one bigger parish, and met in the beginning in two different Lutheran churches, shared space. Took them a long time to build because they didn't really have the money, and they leaned on the big parish to support them. When they finally did build, they never really had resources. The buildings were sort of okay, and the ministries were not as full-hearted as one would want. Again, we're talking about a smaller area, you understand. Although Missoula is the second largest city in the state of Montana, it's only about 80,000 people. So we're not talking about huge. When the parishes came together, they started out by sharing ministry, like they started doing pastoral care together, hospital visitation. Then pretty soon it was the youth ministry that was coming together. And then it was apparent that in the area they needed to lose one priest for the city, and the pastor of one of the parishes was coming up for a move. So then the pastor at the other site then became the pastor. They really did a great process, and I was aware of it all along. They built a team and went through the process for a whole year. The bishop was totally supportive of this because this was not like you're going to become one parish tomorrow. It was a process that was done. When they finally did come together, the bishop actually presided, and they had a truck, and they put the altar of the one church that was going to close the building in the truck and the cross, and he had a procession through town to the location of the parish that was the other church. And then they spent a year suggesting a name. And the name then was given to the parish by the bishop, Blessed Trinity. It couldn't be Holy Trinity because in the diocese there was a Serbian Orthodox church that was named Holy Trinity, and we'd get them mixed up. So that's how they came together. They were kind of, I would say the repertoire was kind of casual. It wasn't planned. They used a worship aid, which is what we still do. However, you had to figure out the whole copyright situation, and some repertoire went away. When I came 2 or 3 years later, they were still talking about, but at the other parish, we used to do it this way. There was a lot of, even though you go through great processes, sometimes humans go slower than the process. So there was a lot of back and forth between we used to do it this way at one parish, etc. Musically, both music directors came together to be ministers. When I came, now I was the third one, but I was to be in charge of the other two. We had a variety of abilities. You have to get all that together. I have to say that now, 10 years later, it's a wonderful group. We have a 4-part choir. We have good music. We have an organ, which we didn't have before, but we also have a piano, and we do a big variety of repertoire. But I think the repertoire was the major challenge at first, and bringing the musicians together with different abilities.
Sure.
I think that's enough for me for now.
Yeah, I want to jump on two things. I sense near the end of our time together, I'd like to hear more from the panel and more from folks who have gone through this about this idea of ritualizing this coming together, this idea of literally driving the altar through town like some sort of Corpus Christi procession almost. The sign, the symbol, the pragmatic nature of that, it had to be moved somehow. So those are part of the story of how we ritualize. I'm going to then now throw this one to either Kim or Father Jim. The notion of how do we discern who gets the leadership position for musicians? You said there were these parishes doing their own thing. Someone probably needs to be in charge. Kim or Father Jim, would you like to talk about any strategies you've heard or led or experienced about how we decide who the team is and what a team might look like in a parish?
Kim?
Sure. For my experience, especially here in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, what I'm hearing more and more is, it's really a matter of communication and making sure that, lines of communication are open with all staff, and really discerning, who's going to be responsible for what aspect of the ministry. Oftentimes, when parishes come together, it's a larger parish, which might have full-time staff, and then a smaller parish, which might have contracted musicians or musicians that come in and play on Sundays. And so it kind of shakes out naturally in some of those scenarios where you've got a full-time musician at one location and they're merging or combining or collaborating with two other parishes, and they each have, Sunday help out musicians or Sunday musicians who are, maybe they're 15 hours a week. So oftentimes it's a natural progression or a natural arrangement of who steps into those leadership positions. We are currently in a merger or a collaboration of three of our larger parishes here in Milwaukee, and one was sold, and then the other two remain open. And it was interesting how the staff, the music and liturgy staff, came together. One person was really in charge of music planning, and one person took on leadership of liturgy and organization there, and they were able to share responsibilities over two positions. So that's one way it's worked for us.
Yeah, here in Pittsburgh, similar kind of thing, Kim. But as the process has developed, it seems like most parishes really have come to the realization that they do need to have one person who is the primary director of music ministries, kind of in charge, or an overseer. And most of the time, from what I hear, it's gone somewhat smoothly, although there have been a few bumps in the road, because sometimes pastors have needed to come in and either maybe just open the job up to anyone if there was some kind of conflict between musicians, and they could apply as well, or just choose one or the other. That hasn't happened in most cases. In most cases, there seemed to have been kind of a natural thing that happened, that oftentimes maybe there was a full-time parish director of music ministries in one church, but not in another, and almost a natural kind of thing that the full-time person who was at the one parish would now be the full-time person at the expanded parish. But yeah, I think in general, you really need someone to be the main person if you're going to try to unite these churches together into one parish community. Someone who is a person who can call forth other talents and the gifts of the people in a non-threatening kind of way, and truly be a pastoral musician, leading the community's prayer and working with other musicians as best as they can.
Here in Chicago, we've been in a pretty intense program for the past few years. When we initially started this, there was the thought that everyone in the parish coming together would submit their resignation, and then people would apply for a position, or someone from outside of the grouping could come in. We since changed that, where that's no longer the case. And then I think we also need to be open to the idea that this idea of a director of music ministries in a collaborative situation, it might mean that part of that person's role is largely perhaps supervising, mentoring, coaching. Maybe the person who played 4 weekend masses now might only play one, but they're spending their time in other aspects of the parish. So I think as folks watching this might find this to be the reality, of course we know things can't go on as they had before, and we just need to be open to envisioning our ministry in a way we never suspected. You might find yourself as a coach, or giving organ lessons, or helping a volunteer understand the techniques for leading congregational song. So frequently it's more than just weekend presence, as it always is. In this case, it's helping others be comfortable leading music on the weekends. What else about leadership? Working together with colleagues, how are things divided up? I would think that the musicians might want to be in a position where they are appearing in other worship spaces. So it's not always a case of this is the musician for this space. Or maybe that does happen in places. Once again, no right or wrong answers, but what are the thoughts about that? Is it a team of musicians who floats, or is it a team of musicians who are one unit but pretty much stay in their own locations? Thoughts about that?
I'll jump in on that one, Michael. I've seen it both ways, where you've got a musician for each individual site. They know the instrument, especially if you're working with pipe organs. They can have an office out of that particular location. But I've also seen it work, whereas you were explaining about the coaching, or more of a coordination, and also a rotation. So where the leader, the director of music ministry in this particular parish, works on the schedule and rotates musicians around. And they also rotate not just the accompanists, but they also rotate their cantors and their choirs. Because I think that's also an important part of music ministry is, the choir can't always just be at that one location. I'm thinking of a particular scenario here in the Archdiocese. We had, I think they're currently up to 8 parishes have come together to form one. It's in the far northern part of the Archdiocese, Fond du Lac, and they have a beautiful collaboration where their director of music ministry simply schedules people based on their availability and the mass schedule. And they're not necessarily guaranteed to stay in the one location. And everybody talks about how it really enriches the community to have that diversity.
Amen. But it can be a challenge too, let's use the cantors, for example. Cantors who are used to singing in one church, singing in another church, and then trying to create a sense of community, from a parish who is used to certain cantors being up there, quote unquote, and all of a sudden seeing a new face up there. Who is that lady, or who is that man now? There's a little bit, of discomfort sometimes. And that's why it's so important, I think, to go beyond just the musical end, to try to create a community that we can try to get to know and love each other. Another thing also, I think, to throw in, one of the things I think that sometimes often needs adjusted is, most of the time, I think, is retraining of some of the very specifics. For example, one parish, maybe unfortunately, I say unfortunately, maybe the cantors were told to sing into the microphone while the assembly is singing. Now, all of us here, we know, Michael, didn't GIA used to have a button at one point, step away from the mic? Okay, all of us know that. But there are parishes out there that perhaps the pastor or previous musician said, sing into the mic on all the hymns and all the responses that the assembly sings on. And so another parish, the musician might have said, well, no, let the assembly sing the assembly song. Well, there's retraining. How about gestures, the cantors? Some parishes may have wide gestures. Others may have no gestures. Those kind of particulars. So there's a lot of retraining that's needed. It has to be done very carefully. People, as all of us know, all of us know, and I know myself, the musicians can be very sensitive people. And we need to be able to just deal with one another in a loving kind of way, in a non-threatening kind of way. But also for people to realize that there will be changes, and change is not always easy, especially for people who have been in the ministry for a long time. So I was just mentioning cantors. Choirs are another issue. We've always done it this way here at this parish. Why are we doing it this way? Or why aren't we doing this, or whatever? So a lot of retraining of ministers, and going beyond our music sphere here, when it comes to the other liturgical ministries, there's a lot of retraining that needs done too. So that's why a common vision is important among members of the pastoral staff, not just among the music ministry, but the clergy of the parish, priests, deacons, other hired lay ministers in the parish. There needs to be a common sense there. What are our goals? What are our values? And then for the music ministry specifically, that's what we're here about, to take those and say, okay, now this is what we need to do to retrain or retool the cantors or the choirs or the instrumentalists or whoever it might be.
Yeah, and this notion, I'm sorry, Mary Jo.
I just throw in, I think the whole attitude of respect for what has been. I, of course, have not had this kind of an experience, but I notice as people change in a parish, as different people are hired, different directors, whatever, to always have respect for what went before, and to find ways to use that to move on to other pasture, to move on to better things, things that will involve people more. I would think that in these big merged parishes I would think the people are still going to the same church. So the musicians and what happens with the music is can be a symbol of what is bigger, that, yeah, we are involved with some other people. So ministry kind of becomes missionary in a way. And sometimes we stay in the same place, but the ministers change around, and we see the bigness of the church that we belong to.
And to be clear, this idea of retraining or retooling doesn't always necessarily need to be corrective. It can be a wonderful opportunity to say, okay, none of us have tried this. And it's always been our hope that we could sing the antiphons, or every Sunday have a choir piece, or introduce bilingual music, or have the clergy stay for the entire closing hymn, or whatever. So it's really a chance. We're given the opportunity to say, hey, we will now have music at our baptisms. So I find that terribly exciting. We're going through that at my place. It's really a chance to rotate ensembles between different masses. Before we get into repertoire, I want to go back to this, the point again about helping to move people along. And I think it's fair to say, whether you are a 40-year veteran in this field and you now find yourself working with another 40-year veteran at the other parish, or the parish consists of volunteers with perhaps very, very little liturgical training. Any strategies to help bring people along? They may be resentful, they may be, I know what I'm doing, or this is all I can do. Any strategies that you have employed to help elevate some of these folks to understand the dignity of their work and the importance of it, and the need for ongoing formation, even if they think they have it all, or even if they've never had any? Strategies for moving groups of people.
First of all, I think affirmation is so important, to affirm people, to thank them, regardless, even if a music minister might think that everything that those cantors did at Parish X is bad, not to say that, not to come across that way, to thank them for their ministry, to thank them for coming forth and sharing their gifts, even if that musical minister thinks that their gifts may not be the greatest musical gifts, not to say those kinds of things, to stress the positives, so that people feel like that they have contributed and they can contribute in the future. So, to affirm them and to affirm the good things about them, and not to right away just point out all the things that are wrong or all the things that we need to change. First of all, it doesn't have to be done all at once, okay? Sometimes musicians think that we need to go in and bam, need to change the music program. It can be a process. In fact, I think it should be a process. We're dealing with people. We're not dealing with objects. We're dealing with people who give their time, their energy, their love to God and to the church and to the parish community. So to bring them along carefully by affirmation, I think is so important as kind of the very first step.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Jim. Absolutely, affirmation all the way. But another technique that I have found works well, especially if you're trying to build that relationship between leaders and the parishes that come together, is just to sit down and go through the hymnals, go through the filing cabinets. These are our favorites. Why is this your favorite? Well, because it evokes this, or the people love to sing that, or but to celebrate ways that you already collaborate, things that you already share in common, and really then highlight that. I found that's just unbelievable. It generates so much energy and so much positivity, and really, I think, does open hearts to the change that they are experiencing.
I think also for people of different parishes to get to know each other as persons and come together for social times without any business, maybe have a cantor party or whatever, just come together, introduce each other, kind of stay away from the hot button issues, and just get to know each other as fellow Christians, as fellow musicians, before we even talk about any kinds of changes that might happen.
In my situation, we have had two. We're so early at this. We've just had two gatherings of the musicians from these three parishes. The first night, we all went to one space, and most of the evening was simply learning about the building. Where did the crucifix come from? What type of piano was it? How long has the parish been here? It was a chance for people to show off their parish and welcome us into it. And then we prayed, and then we sang a few songs to see how we heard. And then last week, we came to my space and we did the same thing. We welcomed folks from these other parishes. So absolutely, coming together. In fact, one of my colleagues, said, boy, are we gonna sing a little bit more for the second rehearsal? Well, no, not necessarily. We are still in this meet and greet phase. So that's essential. I want to remind folks, if you've got questions, you can submit them in the chat. In the question and answer. If you've got questions, please submit them in the question and answer section of the web. Let's move to this idea of repertoire. We've hinted at it. And so it was offered up that perhaps you make a list of all the songs you know, as daunting as that is. It sure helps if you've got a similar hymnal. But what are the strategies for repertoire? Where do we begin with common repertoire? I've got my answer. Let's see who else agrees with me. What are the first things we want to agree upon when it comes to building a repertoire together?
One of the things these two parishes did was get a book that the choir would use. As I said, they were already doing worship aids, and we still do that. I print a worship aid every week. But the parish invested in a set of choir books that conveniently had a lot of the music in it that both parishes used, but they didn't all use the same things. So I remember early on, I got the person who had done the choir at one of the churches in my office and said, let's go through this book and tell me everything in here that you knew or know as a parish. And it was interesting because she said, oh, let's see now, I don't know if I know that from the other parish or from here now. Early on, even, they were getting mixed up, like where did they know it from, which I thought was great. So that was a good, wonderful thing. And we wore out those books and we just bought a whole new set of another book that was kind of in advance. So that was something really good. And we could clean out the files and get rid of all the Xerox music too.
Yeah, so literally that idea of literally being on the same page. Now, of course, we would certainly want our folks viewing to all do this with our new Gather Forth edition hymnal coming out. No, I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. So consider the fresh start that a brand new worship resource has. There are going to be things you know, things you don't know. To go from space to space and see the same book in the pew. To look at the new name of the parish on the cover is something as silly as a visual reminder that we are no longer St. John Parish, we are now Resurrection Parish. Yes, the power of a single resource. And yes, Gather For would be a wonderful choice. But what to agree on first? I want to say service music, Eucharistic acclamations. How do you determine what settings get kept, what gets tossed, what gets learned? Some of your strategies with agreeing on this core repertoire. Or if you're not agreeing on a core repertoire, what has prevented you from doing that? I don't want to suggest that that's a necessity. I think it's a value that we would have this first core liturgical service music. Thoughts on that? How did you discern what folks will be singing?
Well, first of all, I'm all with you, Michael, on hymnals. I'll talk about that now, but then I'll talk about something else in a minute. Here, practically, my two parishes here, my two churches, St. Thomas More had Worship For as a special place in my heart, since I was privileged to serve as one of the 5 editors. Here at the St. John Capistrand, when I was pastor, we got a Gather Comprehensive second edition with a supplement in the back. Fortunately, in a way, the Gathers were 12 years old already, and it didn't take a lot to convince the parishioners at St. John's that we should get Worship For so that we can have the same hymnal for both parishes. Now, there was another, just 2 weeks ago, got a call from a parish that they had Gather 3 and was looking to have that in all their parishes. And I found another parish in the diocese that was having to get Worship For, that one of the churches had extra Gather 3s. So I was able to put that musician in touch with the one who needed gather threes. So I'm all with you that ideally a separate, a common hymnal or some kind of common worship aid is the ideal. But before we get to that point, if we go back in the process, again, talking about service music, Michael, at the very beginning to say, all righty, what service music can we sing by heart that we don't even need music for the assembly for? Which gospel acclamations, which sets of Eucharistic acclamations. So maybe to start slowly with that. Perhaps the Mass of Creation would probably be known by most parishes in the country, I'm going to guess. So maybe settle on that for all the parish masses for a while. Settle on something like the Celtic Alleluia or Gregorian Alleluia, some gospel acclamation that is known. So to have those things, even though at the very beginning of a merge process, there might be different worship resources in pews, to at least have things that could be sung by the assembly that they wouldn't need something printed that would be common to all the parishes. And then gradually, look at hymnody, look at or psalmody before hymnody, then look at hymnody and see how we can have a common repertoire, eventually leading up to some kind of common book or worship resource.
And Mary Jo, you spoke of a worship aid, and once again, although we do have our fondness for hymnals, but even the idea of a worship aid, a neutral worship aid that doesn't seem to be, though this is from the red book or the blue book or the green book, if we're all in different books. So there's certainly value to that. How about the issue of, sure, we know Mass of Creation, but do you do it quarter note equals 72 or quarter note equals 96?
Compromise.
Compromise. There are spatial concerns, the acoustic, how thick is the shag carpeting, how hard is the concrete in the other place. So those are real issues. Introductions. Does your hymnal show accompanists or cantors or leaders what the introductions are going to be? So if it's a different group or keyboard person leading, the congregation is not confused by a 2-bar or a 4-bar intro. And of course, then there's always the issue of how do we determine what is sung on those days when we have to come together? Holy Thursday, Thanksgiving, Good Friday, Easter Vigil. That notion of maybe, and I love this idea of music planning as a buffet, where there are plenty of meat and potatoes, but then there are some rare dishes on the table that maybe you're brave enough to try. And it's always fun to go to someone else's house and be served, their cheese ball recipe or something. And I think that's a little bit of it where, yeah, maybe there's some unfamiliarity, but in time, we'll learn it. I'm happy to share this song with you, and I'm happy to share the song you give me. So music for feast days, strategies, thoughts, compromises, how has that worked for you?
Well, one initial question that some of us face here is, where is this Mass going to take place? If there's one parish, let's say the Mass of the Lord's Supper on Holy Thursday, which church is big enough to hold the assembly for that? And so that can be an issue too. So determining which churches to have the whole Holy Week. Where do you have the Easter Vigil? Hopefully there's one Easter Vigil if there's one parish. What do you do with several Paschal candles that you may need for funerals in other churches? So I think there are scheduling questions first, before we look at the musical issues. But then the musical issues, for example, if there's only one Easter Vigil or one Mass of the Lord's Supper, then how many of your musical forces do you get together for that? Is there space in the church you'll be using to combine all the choirs together? Which repertoire, again, are people used to? So those are some of the questions initially that would come to mind for me.
Kim, you were going to say something, I think, on this?
I was going to say something. My experience involves also collaborating or working in a multicultural multi-parish community where we have a Spanish speaking community and an English speaking community. And we try to find, for those feast days, Triduum, for example, we're all coming together, one set of services for both communities. And so not only are you working with music that's different, but now you've got language. And I just want to throw something out there because it has worked really well for us, is to find the language or the songs that really unite. For example, Ubi Caritas, it's in Latin. It's a traditional, there's often a traditional setting, a refrain style setting, or the chant, or find some of those common melodies that have bilingual lyrics. And really use them as your new repertoire. And I think also, I like what you were saying, Michael, about, sometimes you want to go to the other house and you'd be served the cheese ball, something that, so it's sitting down with the leadership in the parishes, it's sitting down with the ensembles, with the cantors, and, tell me about your Triduum traditions. What do you use for the washing of the feet? And really listen to what their experience is, and consider pulling out the best of each community for a celebration of the Triduum. But I think the other thing is too about Jim, you're talking about scheduling. I know what works a lot in our archdiocese is when the Triduum will rotate or the high feast day will rotate. So it's a feast of, I don't know, Saint Joseph. Okay, the new parish is Saint Joseph. So one year on the feast of Saint Joseph, Solemn Day of Saint Joseph, it's in one parish or one location, and then the next year it's in another. And sometimes it's just celebrating those things that are unique to your parish. That you can really come together and rally around and form that unity in community.
We're about 10 minutes left. Behind the scenes here is my colleague, Matt Reichert. Matt, are you able to share the document that Jim provided in the chat feature? Well, even better, here it is. Participants, this is yours for the taking. So please thank Jim the next time you see him. But this is just a little 2-page document he created. And Jim, do you want to go just through this very quickly? I'm delighted with how many of these things we actually covered, but these just might be some more ideas for folks. So.
Sure. At the beginning of our diocesan reorganization process, different diocesan offices were asked to come up with sections for a binder for administrators to help them as they minister in a new parish. We call it a blueprint. And so I was tasked with coming up with some ideas for music ministry. And I had some of our other pastoral musicians in our diocese contributed to this. And basically, I suggested that we don't attack everything at once, and maybe there's certain phases. And we talked about this afternoon in some way. So briefly, we're looking through this. Phase 1, if there's a new mass schedule, there's some immediate questions that need to be taken care of. Who's going to minister what masses? But then number 2, and we've talked about some of these already, there's a lot of information that an administration needs to look at in parishes. And there are a lot of things are up there, job descriptions, who chooses the music, what worship aids, cantors, choirs, where they rehearse, budgets, weddings and funerals, what's the stipend for weddings and funerals for musicians, something very practical, where are the keys, any music cabinets, organs, pianos, etc. And then 3 there, with input of the current leadership, determine what congregational repertoire all the parishes have in common. Again, we're at the discussion phase. And then meet with the volunteer musicians, perhaps in a social setting, as we mentioned already, to listen to their concerns. 5, to establish trust by not making immediate changes to the music program unless necessary. So I look upon that as an initial phase whenever a new parish or new merger or whatever you want to call it is announced or gets together. And then phase 2, which is more active, consider hiring one director of musical ministries, as we discussed. Talk about other staff that's needed. Very important, I think, job descriptions and clear responsibilities. I can't stress that enough, because so many times there can be hard feelings because, I always played this mass, or I always cantored this, or, clear job descriptions, responsibilities for all members of the music staff, paid and volunteer. Determine common stipends. Number 5, begin the process of having musical repertoire that's in common. We talked about that already. Consider combining the parish choirs together. And then phase 3, which is perhaps the goal, to further develop the musical repertoire for the entire parish, work towards that musical resource, hymnal or worship aid that could be in common. Consider having the cantors and choirs alternate between the various buildings. If a building is going to be closed, reevaluate the parish music staffing needs. And that could be uncomfortable because maybe some job positions might need to be eliminated. And finally, if a church building is closed, determine what happens to musical instruments, music stands, all those other kinds of things that pertain to music and music ministry. So that's just a real quick going through this. So if anyone who's tuning in, can use this, feel free if it's a help in your own situation.
What have we missed, panelists? When I invited you to come on, what was the 1 or 2 things you were very, very anxious to tell people about this whole idea?
I had 2 things. And the first thing is recognize and be aware that there are closing a parish or merging. It's a loss in some regards. And that grief is very real. And so it may not be easy for everyone. Some parishioners are thinking we should merge right away, and they're all gung-ho, and they really they're on board. And some it's difficult. And so that's just part of the human experience. And there's all kinds of resources, your pastoral staff or diocesan staff can help you with in that regard. But then the other thing is, don't stay there. It might be difficult to merge or to combine or collaborate to form that multi-parish community, but we can't stay there. And we always have to look forward, and we always have to keep going. And so go forward without fear. Don't be afraid. Music is the one thing that unites us as Catholics. I like to use, different examples of beloved Catholic hymns that we sing throughout the country. And it doesn't matter if you're in the Diocese of Pittsburgh or the Archdiocese of Milwaukee or wherever. And there's going to be common stuff that we all know. To celebrate that and not be afraid to try new things.
Before I get to Jim and Mary Jo, we had a couple of questions. One here is about how are dioceses dealing with full-time musicians who are getting reduced to part-time, or part-times who now must exit the ministry due to reduced opportunities. And what are we seeing? I think one of the good news, and I'm sorry to take a different slant on this, I think that these scenarios of communities coming together now provide for the opportunity of something that wasn't there before, a full-time director of music ministries. If a parish was able to only give X amount for a musician, but now that parish can give 3 times X, maybe that is enough to get a full-time musician. And I think one of the hopes is in some of these dioceses throughout the country that there might be a smaller but more trained and full-time pool of musicians. And then remembering that the diocese is the local church, this also enables musicians to interact with other musicians and who can meet during the day. I'm not discounting the reality of places that can't presently afford full-time musicians, please. But the fact that perhaps a more closely knit group of musicians throughout an area or a diocese not only serves that particular parish, but has the ability to serve a vicariate or a deanery or whatever situation you work in. Mary Jo, anything?
You know, my situation is so much different than the situations of Jim and Kim overseeing larger areas. But I think to be patient and to go in peace is important. To find the things that you can do together and build forward, not always relying on things that would be my advice.
Jim?
And lastly, all of us and those involved in parish music ministry leadership positions have certain end goals that we would like to reach, but it's the journey that's more important than the end goals.
Yes.
The whole St. Augustine homily. We're moving on. We're singing Alleluia as we're going, but
Right.
we are certainly on a journey, and it's not always the journey's end, but sometimes it's the journey itself.
That's right.
Yeah, folks, this is going to happen to you. Viewers, this is going to happen to you. And just to be open to the new possibilities and new ways of doing things, and have fun with it. We are at the 1 hour mark. We're always happy to get questions here at GIA. I can pass things on to our panelists if you'd like to talk to them or maybe hear more from them. Please, if you're viewing this live, share this with your colleagues, even colleagues of the parish who some of these same things apply to their own ministry, whether it be faith formation or administration or school. And we're going to be back on Thursday. A team will be back in a couple days to talk about our initiatives with our cloud offerings, the Psalter existing out there as a cloud to download and choose from, hymnal resources, octaval resources. So a new strategy and initiative we're taking about making more things online related to hymnals. So your hymnal is no longer just a bunch of books, but this whole resource library available to you. Panelists, thanks for playing. You'll all receive we've got some lovely parting gifts for you, a copy of our new Gather for hymnal, and when they're out, they're almost here. So folks, thanks for checking in today. Keep in touch with us. Panelists, thank you. It's always good to be with you, and it's great that we're all together today. And keep in touch, folks, and let us know what we at GIA and World Library can do to help you in your ministry. So feel free to say goodbye to each other on the chat. Bye, panelists. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.